All right, I'm going to try and squeeze in a call, but guys, let me ask you as a remedy issue. We talked about things maybe that could improve the situation. We heard from the Attorney General, Eric Holder spoke. We obviously heard from the President. We heard earlier today from both Sharpton and Crump and others that they hope the Department of Justice can get involved, but that's a really high threshold, isn't it? To have them even hear the case, they have to prove that his civil rights were violated, and to come on top of a grand jury is an extremely difficult threshold, right? I
completely agree. If there's no criminal indictment, then the likelihood of a civil rights case, absent any evidence that it was motivated, intentional killing motivated by some kind of racial bias or some deprivation of a civil right, aside from the criminal act, I couldn't see it. And then it goes to what Doug said, are you doing it just because? And that would be as much a tragedy as anything else.
Doug, on civil suits here, I defer to you. This won't ease the pain, but you're going to be talking, I would guess, about huge numbers here. Some of these cases where there may not be a criminal conviction, but there'll be a civil penalty. I always wonder, is there any way to not make them concurrent, but make them one follows after the other a little quickly? I mean, if people are looking for some sense of justice, a dollar can't replace a life, but you would think if they came a little bit more quickly one after the other, that might ameliorate it a little bit.
In the civil after the criminal?
Yeah.
No, I mean, the civil suit has to be discovered that it takes place. In a civil suit like this, they'll look at the police procedure very carefully and whether it was followed. In the criminal context, it's more the reasonable man, justification, was he justified in what he did. But in the civil suit, they're going to look very, very closely at what he did. Was he following procedure exactly?
The other thing about the civil suit is police officers in New York are entitled to qualified immunity. So if they were doing their job, then this lawsuit gets kicked, meaning that if the police officer reasonably feared for his life, then that was justified homicide and there is no wrongful death.
Let me bring in a phone call, and I'm going to get your take on what Al's got to say. Al, I understand you're an officer yourself in Staten Island, is that correct?
Yes, I am, and I work in that precinct for over 20 years.
Well, I'm very interested in your perspective. Obviously, we're talking in the context post-Ferguson about the Eric Garner case. What's your sense as to where we are now, and do you think there'll be additional pressures focusing on the case here, especially given what we've seen unfold this week?
Well, this is something you have to take because I was listening to you gentlemen talk. Number one, that park that this incident happened, that is our number one quality of life issue in the 120. There are more quality of life crimes in that park than any place else we have in our precinct. The park is filled with crackheads, drug addicts, and homeless. Number two, we don't have a choice to decide what crimes to go after or not. I know you said, just loose cigarettes. Let's keep in mind who buys loose cigarettes. Crackheads, homeless people, heroin addicts, school teachers, sanitation workers, reporters. We don't buy loose cigarettes. There's a school 4 blocks away. Parents in that neighborhood have to walk 3 blocks around. They can't walk through that park because people like Eric Garner, who it is unfortunate he lost his life. Believe me, no officer wants to take someone else's life. But you have to understand, they have rights to that park. But they can't
Al, and I'm not cutting you off. I want you to stay with me. But my basic question to you is this. Everything you say, no one's going to disagree with. But when we have a situation where the guy's not fighting back, he's got his hands up, and there's certainly a very strong police presence there. It's not one cop against the guy that's outweighing him by 100 pounds. You got 5 or 6 guys there. Did he deserve what happened to him? And moreover, when he says repeatedly, I can't breathe, getting his head shoved in the pavement, the world saw that. I don't find anybody who thinks that the action justified the reaction.
And he said no. This ends today, and he went into a fighting stance. You look at the video closely, not just to what you guys want to see. Okay? This ends today is a fight when you're in the street. Remember, it's nice to Monday morning quarterback when you're on in office. I want to go home to my 2 children at night. And a 6'7" man put his hands up and said, this ends today. Was there one kick? Was there one punch? Did anyone do anything to him? No. It was a takedown. And yes, I know he said, I can't breathe. And they got off of him. The whole incident took 11 seconds. But nobody wants to say that. And nobody wants to say that Officer Pantallero's arm went underneath the shoulder. And yes, when he was going back into the window, and they said, watch the window, and they tried to get him down more, that's when it changed. But you have to understand something. There was no intent to do that to that individual. We didn't go out there to kill that individual. It's an unfortunate situation, but the bottom line is this. If he did put his hands behind his back and went to the precinct, which he's been arrested for this 8 other times, he's been arrested 32 times in his career, and he would have got a DAT, he wouldn't have passed away. It's unfortunate. Believe me. And Officer Pantaleone is going to have to live with this for the rest of his life, but he didn't intend for this to happen.
Al,
and
Al, I'm sorry, because I'm supposed to wrap in 20 seconds. I want to first give you a chance. Jason, that's it. Right there in that call, and I appreciate Al very much for calling. I got to tell you, there's that perception of if people don't follow the rules, we're doing our job, we're putting our lives on the line every day here, and there's this debate as to whether or not the chokehold was even allowed protocol, and then you got the vast majority of the public saying, my God, in living color, a guy was choked to death in broad daylight on a Staten Island sidewalk for selling cigarettes. There's that disconnect, and there's that perception problem that we have, and I don't think I could have summed it up better than Al did in terms of articulating the two different schools of thought, and that's what Mr. Donovan's going to be dealing with as we speak.
It is what he's going to have to deal with, and the reality is if you talk to experts on police tactics, you don't go for a chokehold in this situation. You go for the legs, you take the man down. A chokehold is a deadly maneuver. And yes, it is illegal. Yes, we can all think about life or death situations where it may be needed to be used by a police officer. This was not that situation. And just a second, Rich, on the what can be done going forward. You know, the one question I really have coming out of Ferguson is this distance between Wilson and Brown when the shots were fired. And I was amazed to see in that grand jury testimony that A, there were no photographs taken of that scene, no photographs taken of the cartridges and where those shots were made, and no distances that wasn't measured from the body to the cartridges, which allowed
I'm sorry,
Wilson.
Jason, I got to wrap here, and I got to wrap this segment. You guys were great tonight. Thank you all very much, and a happy Thanksgiving to everybody
Happy
out
Thanksgiving.
here. To you, the audience, as well, and I know the calls were terrific, and I can only get to a fraction of them, but thank you for everybody who called in. I appreciate the participation also online as well. We're going to have headlines making news in the Valley after this.